No milk today, my love has gone away. The bottle stands forlorn, a symbol of the dawn. No milk today, it seems a common sight.
We are at the McDonald's drive-thru. Welcome to our mukbang. Yeah, we're gonna go in here and get some dinner and talk about the Nestlé boycott. How do I use a drive-thru? Hi, can we please get one French fries and one ice cream cone? One ice cream cone, please. Okay, so Amber, I have a question.
Yeah.
What would it take for you to stop supporting like McDonald's or another company that you shop at a lot?
I think it's a values thing. So I haven't eaten at Chick-fil-A ever since like the owner proclaimed that they didn't support LGBTQ members of society.
Thank you.
The ice cream will be right over.
Okay. I think I've heard a lot of people have been boycotting Chick-fil-A recently. So for my project, I was researching the Nestlé boycott. Have you heard about that? No. In 1977, this boycott began.
Have a great night.
You too. It was like the first really big transnational humanitarian boycott. So the people that were involved in the boycott were really divorced from the people who they were boycotting in support of. In the 1940s, people in the Western world started to get really into using infant formula. And then in the 60s, people were like, hold up, we do not want to use infant formula anymore. We want to go back to breastfeeding. It's more natural. I think it's better for the babies. And Nestle was like, oh man, we have been making such a huge profit, and now we have this just huge profit loss. Where are we going to turn? So they turned to the developing world. They thought, we can go in here and basically tell these people whatever we want, and they're gonna really believe us because we are Western and urbanized, and we're a big corporation that has all this economic success. And we're gonna tell people how they can be more like Europe and more like the United States. I'm using the buffalo hot sauce. They turned to the third world. People weren't really familiar with infant formula at that point. They'd been breastfeeding, but a lot of the people wanted to urbanize more, so they were kind of gung-ho about the whole thing. Nestle entered, and other infant formula companies as well, entered Jamaica and Chile and Nigeria, Brazil, and all these other countries. They started having these campaigns where they would put up billboards and they would have promotions in stores advertising these really healthy looking babies that were big and fat and strong and happy. They would sponsor the creation of hospitals. They had free samples that went home with babies. They also dressed up young women from the communities in nurses' costumes and had them hand out infant formula to people. And the infant formula was expensive. These areas were rural. There were extremely low literacy rates, especially for women, extremely high poverty rates. The women just were hearing this medical information that was, you should be using infant formula, it's what's best. So they agreed with that, but they also were having trouble paying for it. What they would do was they would take the infant formula and they would dilute it with water, which is something that people do all the time. You know, you're running out of shampoo, you dilute it with water, right? No big deal, it still works. It didn't work in this case. First of all, the caloric intake and the nutrients were nothing like what it was supposed to be. But more importantly, the water was contaminated. The babies who had fragile, undeveloped immune systems were being exposed to these bacteria that were in the water. They were having chronic wasting diseases that were leading to malnutrition and dehydration, and then ultimately, if not death, extreme physical and intellectual impairment. The entire culture of these towns was becoming formed around infant death. In Brazil, they created a new way of thinking about death that was in line with sort of Catholic values, that when a baby's born, it's not really born, it's just kind of having a test on earth and God will probably take it back. Infant death became just something that happened. All these researchers started realizing what was happening, and they had this big meeting. The United Nations Protein Advisory Group got together.
Protein advisory?
Yeah. Emphasis, this is sweet and sour sauce. It was at the time of a lot of emphasis on protein intake, and they were looking at how they could better handle malnutrition in developing countries, and what they found was that the infant formula was causing a lot of malnutrition. So they had this big meeting. They were like, what are we gonna do? We see these trends. Let's make a statement, maybe saying that we shouldn't have this. And there was this one guy, Dr. Derek Jelliff, who just really went off and was like, no, we can't just be soft on this. We have to tell people what's going on. We have to be aggressive and we need to stop this from happening. That caught on. So there was a magazine published called The New Internationalist. It wasn't like People magazine, like in the checkout line, but it still hit a lot of people. And they had an edition called The Baby Food Tragedy. There were these photos of really malnourished children, of weeping mothers. There was a gravestone. Mothers, even after this was happening, had no idea that it was infant formula that was causing this death. At the gravestone in Zambia of this infant, a mother had left a tin can of infant formula and a baby bottle, not knowing that's what had caused it, which was kind of a striking image. That was in 1973 that was published. In 1974, there was another pamphlet published called The Baby Killer, which was a more aggressive title, and that one was by the War on Want, another British organization. After that, there was kind of a shift. All of these had just been talking about infant formula as like something that's bad. In 1974, this Swiss activist group said, let's republish The Baby Killer in German, but let's change it up a little bit. Let's call it Nestlé Kills Babies. They published it, and Nestlé got really mad, and they sent them to trial. The trial went on from 74 to 76. In 76, Nestlé won, you know, as corporations often do in the courtroom. But during that time, there was a lot of media coverage. Sure, Nestlé won in the court. The people that were watching this trial became aware that Nestlé was killing babies. Got some fries?
I use the ice cream sauce.
This is where we get into like, all this is kind of happening in Europe. During this trial, the Bern trial is what they called it, of Nestlé versus Swiss activists, people in America figured out what was going on and they started to get mad. The United States is Christian, and these church groups were looking for a cause to get behind, and they were like, you know what, infant formula, let's get behind that, because it had, this is honey mustard.
Nestle's quick chocolate flavor. Today I know I can drink it slow.
Oh, Bunny, don't you ever give up? So good and rich and chocolate that you can't drink it slow. If it's quick,
I can.
you can't.
I can.
Can't.
Can.
Can't.
Can't.
You know something, Bunny? I can't either.
It had all the things that they were looking for. It was a moral ill. The National Council of Churches put together the ICCR. I don't like the honey mustard, actually. Went out and they got all these people that were in the churches and said, hey, did you hear about what's happening? And then some coalitions were formed from that. One of those was INFACT, the Infant Food Action Coalition. They are the people who got together and said, how are we going to address this? Let's have a boycott. So back in that time, there was not social media, there wasn't like internet news sites, it was really different, but there was still the ability for people to get information, so they needed to make sure that they were kind of controlling the media, and they had some tactics to convince people that this was a disaster because it was so far away. So how do you make people care enough to change their lifestyles? They used three main tactics. They made people feel connected. They did that through like visual imagery and through using vivid language and talking about motherhood as this universal concept we can all understand. They ascribed blame specifically to Nestlé. They gave people a target. It's a lot easier to be mad at a specific thing than the like abstract infant formula corporation, and Nestlé was something that was, you know, everyone knows Nestlé, so it was kind of easy for them to employ that as a target. They made everything legible, so they used simple language, they used scientific research, they really simplified it for people and made people understand what was going on, and they also didn't make it too horrifying. They always included, hey, this really bad thing is happening, but like breastfeeding is really awesome and we can work together and make something happen. And it worked. People got on board all over the world. They expressed this idea that in a capitalist society, use their own purchasing power as a way of voting and a way of, and the boycott went on for 7 years. It ended in 1984, so 1977 to 1984. In 1981, the International Code on Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes was fully introduced, and it was passed all but one country, which was the United States. It was Reagan, really into free market enterprise.
Has it been passed since?
Yes, when Clinton was in office, he passed it. The International Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes was passed, and that got rid of a lot of the stuff that I was talking about earlier. So no more women dressed up as nurses, no more Nestlé sponsoring hospitals, no more incentives, no more advertisements that show happy, healthy infants. You were still allowed to sell breast milk substitutes anywhere, but you couldn't market them as infant formula because it's really for toddlers. There needed to be visual instructions and not just written instructions for people who could not read. And there was great success. Chile, which had seen a 90% drop in their breastfeeding rates, went back up to like 50% of people breastfeeding, which isn't everyone, but it's something. The number of infants that were infirmed in hospitals dropped. Half the number were infirmed, and that was pretty quick. It hasn't been linear. Just last year, they started marketing in a not okay way. The boycott achieved what it intended to achieve. And it really made a statement about how activists can work to make people care about something that they aren't connected to necessarily, but make people feel like they're connected. So do you think you'll have Nestle products?
I think I'll stop. The thing is, I just don't know what's Nestle, and I guess I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, they kind of like own everything. This is hot mustard. What are ways that you think in this day and age people find ways to feel connected to other communities? Do you see like on your Instagram feeds ever like activist accounts trying to like find ways to like support communities that are just really, really different than the one that you live in?
Yeah, one of the ones that really stand out to me in my mind immediately was during the Dakota Access Pipeline.
I wonder how the Nestle boycott would have been if it was in the day of age of YouTube and mukbangs.
We wouldn't be eating. Well, this isn't Nestle, so we're fine.
It might be Nestle, actually, the ice cream.
Oh, no.
It's possible. Okay, thanks for tuning in, Professor Hecht. I hope you enjoyed our mukbang. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. I put out new content every week. Bye!
No milk today, my love has gone away. The bottle stands forlorn, a symbol of the dawn.